The hardest lesson for me, I can speak to myself, is the gravity of small mistakes, the cost of the small mistake. And it can cost money, it can cost time, it can even possibly put somebody in danger. My name is Matt Hovdenes. I'm the owner of Right Way Ag in Casselton, North Dakota. I'm also the current president of NAAREF. NAAREF is the sister organization of the NAAAA. And I was on the board of the NAAA. My state sent me as a representative on the board. And I was also involved with the PASS program. And the PASS program, as a presenter, you get involved with some of the committees that develop the program content and work with other little subcommittees on NAAREF. And as I worked on those subcommittees, I just naturally was there and got asked to be on NAAREF. Spent 2 years just as a board member, and then they made this is my second year as president of NAAREF. I think the mindset shift that came with turbine aircraft is the biggest change in safety. And I think it's because of the culture. When you have people flying $1 million airplanes, they're going to have a different mindset than flying a $50,000 airplane. And I think as the industry moved from small pistons to large piston engine airplanes to turbines, just by default, we became more professional because we had to, with the level of the equipment we're flying. I think that, coupled with the societal need to be professional now, society does not need people that are unprofessional anymore. It's a different era and a different time, and just competition. If you're not professional, and part of being professional is being safe, you're probably going to not be a good competitor against somebody that is professional, which is a safe, quality applicator. I think so. The bar has raised itself, and I think there's a pretty significant shift in the professionalism in the industry. And that's not to say that the people before that weren't professional. It's just there's been a cultural shift since I've been around for the last. I've been in the industry since the late '90s, and I've just seen more of a focus on professionalism and safety. And I think it's just necessary. It's just unacceptable to not be focused on that now, where 25 years ago, the needs and the focuses were just a little bit different. And I will say that the safety and professionalism that we have now, that foundation was built by the people that did this 30 years ago. The reason we are able to do this is because of people before us. So I believe that's the biggest impact. The other thing is technology. The little things we're doing to aircraft now are making big differences. Things we can do, we have airbags in aircraft now. People are putting stronger windshields in aircraft. They're putting wire cutters on. They're continuing to think about the pilot and pilot safety when they're putting these airplanes together. And so if something were to happen, we are more likely to deal with it. And we do better maintenance. You get into turbine aircraft, you're going to maintain a $450,000 engine. You want that thing to not quit on you because it's going to be very expensive if you get it that thing. So the turbine aircraft is just another piece of that whole pie. We're just not taking the risk that we used to with our equipment. Well, I think most pilots and operators are very, very good at thinking about everything. Otherwise, they wouldn't be good pilots and operators. I think one of the things that often gets overlooked is stress and the effect of stress on pilots. And and how that interacts with everything else. Just for an example, if I'm stressed, I'm already thinking about something other than the task at hand. I'm usually stressed about something. I'm stressed about getting the job done, or stressed about what my loader did or didn't do that morning. And so I'm already moving my mind somewhere else, away from the mission. And if my loader then continues to make me upset, now I'm going to be focused on that problem, and I'm going to be stressed about it. I'm going to fixate on it. It's okay to focus on the problem, but we need to be able to crawl in the airplane and shut all that off. And I think when a pilot is stressed, they don't often know how it's affecting their safety until after the fact. They'll get out of the aircraft at the end of the day and say, well, I was stressed and that affected my productivity, or affected my level of risk that I was taking, or something like that. And I think that's the hardest thing to learn as an experienced operator. And it's the hardest thing to think about because we don't notice it.
I used to travel quite a bit as a hired pilot, and I would go from up here in North Dakota down to Nebraska and southern Minnesota to spray different crops, primarily corn fungicide. And it is a unique skill to be able to just go to another operation and start working there, because everything's different. The loading system's different, the people are different, the way you figure loads, the way your dispatch maps are different. And then you're not familiar with the obstacles, you're not familiar with the crops. So everything's different. And to be able to do that, you have to have a relationship with an operator. You have to go to an operator that you trust. And so I had guys that I knew, and I kind of knew their area, and then I kept going back to the same spot. And so it was new the first year, and then every year it was harder. And as I got older, I became less flexible. So it would be harder for me to move to all these different things, because you kind of get set in your ways. And so what I had several different people those were my people that I would travel to each year. If you're just going to go to work for another operator, you need to be willing to be upfront and say, hey, I'm going to need some help. Where are the obstacles? What are the things I need to watch out for? Weather. In Nebraska, the fog was a real thing. Every day they had fog. You go out to different parts of the world, they don't get fog. So if you're in an area that's never been around fog, you need some real guidance when you get there. We were just talking about specialty crops. There are certain specialty crops that you need to really be aware of and be able to identify so you don't get into trouble. And I think it's really important there, again, to have a relationship with that operator and the pilots there, so that when you get there, they're going to watch your back. For example, in Nebraska, there's seed corn detasselers. And the first few years I was in there, they wouldn't even send me near where there were seed corn detasselers. They wouldn't send me into an area where they were around. After a couple of years, I understood their policies and the distances the setbacks that they always required. And so then we would go in and do some of that. But it wasn't until I felt like I was more at home to do that. If you're going to go just cold into it, you need to be very, very open about, hey, I need some help. What do I need to watch out for? And how can we do this? Because when you're working for another operation, both of your butts are on the line, if you will. His 137 certificate and your reputation is on the line, and you both share some liability.
I wouldn't say it's different than a regular aviation student. I think pilots in general are go-getters, and we're confident. I mean, that's just a blanket statement. And with that personality trait, I think sometimes those show through into you mentioned the hazardous attitudes. And of course, we can talk for hours about the FAA's 5 hazardous attitudes, but confidence is good until you have too much. Being in control is great until you're too controlling of your people. And I think we, as a group, all have moments where those are probably a hazardous problem. And I think that's the biggest thing, is to keep those in check. I've run into ag pilots that had all kinds of different attitudes and all kinds of different things, and a lot of us are able to deal with that and be safe professional pilots. And that's the difference, is you have to learn how to manage that as a pilot.
So as you gain knowledge in career, I think your parameters will change. For example, the first 7 years I flew, I didn't go under a wire. I wouldn't go under a wire. I wouldn't do a job that required me to go under a wire. I would either find a different way to spray that field, or I just wouldn't do it. And that didn't matter who I was working for, where I was working, what I was spraying, what equipment I was in, it just wasn't going to happen. As I got older and more experienced, I finally talked to some people, and I came up with some parameters which made it okay to go under certain wires in certain circumstances. And now those are what I do. And I have some very clear things that will allow me to do that. But I still tell people I don't go under wires. And so as you move from operator to operator, I think it's important that you yourself as a pilot create some hard lines in the sand that you're just not going to cross. And maybe every year you reevaluate them, or every month, or every 6 months, depending on what that line is. And we talk a lot about personal minimums, and you need to establish your own personal minimums. And if that doesn't work for that operator, you need to just have that conversation and say, hey, you wanted me to fly in these conditions, and I won't, ever. This is my line right now. Or as of right now, I won't do this. If that's not okay, we just need to talk about it and figure out, is this going to work? And I think that's one of the things that we get so desperate to do the job that we don't draw those lines in the sand. And as you get older and more experienced, those lines shift. And there's things that I would do when I was 25 that there's no way I would do now. And rightfully so. And there's things that I wouldn't do when I was 25 that, yeah, there's certain circumstances that would allow me to do this if I can control some of that.
Outside influences in general have a pretty high impact on the level of safety, and it's because of the risk we take, right? We can all sit in the wintertime after a good season and say, yeah, we're not going to do this, we're not going to do this. Well, if you're experiencing a drought or a fierce battle with a competitor, and the acres aren't coming in, or the money isn't coming in for whatever reason, you get stressed, and you get to a point where you start making decisions based on money, not based on safety. Do I defer this maintenance to try and save some money? Do I, agree to work for less money, which in turn causes me more stress because I got to do more work, which, it's a snowball. So outside influences could have a negative impact on safety. They also can have a very, very positive impact on safety. If whatever that impact is, let's say it is a drought, leads to a grasshopper infestation and there's a lot of work. Well, we've got a lot of work. There's not a lot of stress. There's usually the financial end is good when there's a lot of work. And so that can be a benefit to safety too. So I can't say that like a drought is bad or good commodity prices is good. Usually when the farmers are making money, we're doing better. Where sometimes when things aren't going as well, we make decisions based on finances as opposed to what's necessarily the safest. Keeping a customer. In ag, in most businesses, but especially in agriculture, a customer is a person you have a relationship with at some level. I have never sprayed at a company that was just completely detached from that person or people on that work order. There are different levels of that. And I think the stress involved with losing that relationship probably causes as much problems as the stress involved with losing the money. It's personal. you'll hear people talk about their customers. And I would say, just switch that word out. They're talking about their friends, okay? It hurts when their friend goes somewhere else. And it sounds high schoolish, it sounds petty, but you're not only losing their business, but you're losing that relationship. Even if there are stages removed, I mean, a lot of us work through retailers where we may not know the customer as well as others. That's still, when we're spraying their field, we're taking care of their business. They're trusting us to take care of that. And so there's a big dynamic for losing customers, and people will do things sometimes that don't make sense. Okay, they'll charge less just to keep a customer. And there gets to be a lot of stress around that. And I think what's important to do is you have to balance the reality of there are times you have to do things to keep a customer there are also times when it's not worth it. And it's not worth it financially or emotionally to just deal with that. And that's what makes good business owners sustainable, is they can make those decisions and they're making those calls. A lot of times when you lose a customer, a lot of times they end up back in a few years. If you take care of them, they'll take care of you, is kind of how we've always thought about that. The stress from losing the customer can be very detrimental to safety because it's a financial hit. We make dumb decisions when we make money, or when we're making decisions based on money. We need to make decisions based on safety and professionalism, not money. On the other part of that question was when people are, if there's a competition in a company, inside a company, and I've actually been a part of that. And it actually can be good and fun and safe if it's managed properly. An example, I worked at a company but this was about 10 years ago. We had 2 hired pilots plus the company owner. And the company owner didn't get involved with who got what work. It was just, we all took work but his only thing was, I don't care. We just want it done right, and we want it done safe. And it became a friendly competition. And we were fair about it with each other, and we both got better. And we also both realized that we got to a point where we just couldn't do anymore and still do a good job. And it was a really good exercise for all of us. That also could go south if it's not managed properly. So there needs to be some people overseeing something like that, because we are competitive by nature, and we all think, it's easy to think that person's getting the good work and that person's giving me the bad work and whatever. And at the end of the day, we got to do a safe job with the work we have. We got to do a good job with the work we have. And if that doesn't work, then we need to deal with that outside of the flying environment. If you have a pilot that, for example, is upset with the acres he's getting, maybe that's not the company he should work for. Maybe that's a conversation that says, hey, if this doesn't change, and that's fine. That needs to be okay, because sometimes people need to move on and it just isn't a fit. But it takes some pretty mature adults to just sit down and hash that stuff out and remove the emotion about it. I think it's important for an operator, a business owner, an operator pilot, to understand what's at stake. And I think most do. As an operator myself, I'm very aware of the check side, right? You'll find that this industry is full of varying levels of business talent, really good aviation talent, and varying levels of business talent. And I do think it's important to understand the business, but I also think part of being a good business owner is if you're not a good businessman, you need to hire somebody to do that for you. If you're the owner and your talent's in the airplane, and that's where you're the best asset to the company, that's where you need to be, and you need to have the ability to hire the right person Traditionally, in the past, that was your spouse. I mean, a lot of couples ran businesses, and that's changed a lot since I've been in the industry. But a lot of the business was done as a couple, and it was, everybody found their role. But is it important? Yes. Business owners need to understand what's going on with business. But if they're not the best person to run their business, they might be better just sitting in an airplane and letting some of these other pieces fall into place. When you're flying, or when you have pilots flying for you, you need to be able to compartmentalize everything else that's going around you and just worry about being a safe professional pilot. Generally speaking, most ag pilots have developed that. They have dealt with stuff, and they're able to just shut it out and fly. And I think if business owners are struggling financially, the minute they step into an airplane, they need to be able to shut that out. They need to be able to say, whatever's happening in the checkbook, that's not anywhere in my thought process right now. I'm just worried about doing a safe professional job. And so the ripple effect is, if you lose the ability to do that, at some point things get so bad that we can't keep them out of our mind. And that's when you got to stop, and somebody else needs to take over the airplane. You can't sit in an airplane as an operator if you're so focused on what's going on in the office or the checkbooks. And a lot of operators, you'll find, when they get very busy, they get out of the airplane. And that's why. It's because they're better for the company. And it's not necessarily that they enjoy it. It's just that's the best thing to do. Because the stress of running a business can be very, very difficult to manage while you're flying that. I was the chairman of the Precision Ag Committee on the NAAREF board. And that looked at different things that we're doing as an industry, and where we're going as an industry. Personally, myself, I look at some technology we have and try and figure out how do we utilize this better and do more. We've had precision ag capabilities on our airplanes since the 90s. We're doing things with shapefiles before they even had GPSs and auto steers and combines. And I think we've lost touch with the fact that we have a lot of technology on board our aircraft. I have some situations where I thought, hey, maybe we could try some different things to either save money, reduce inputs, or maybe some things that make agronomic sense. And we've been trying. It's worked okay, it's worked poorly, it's worked well. We've had a huge gamut, but I think it's important to keep those things moving forward. And I think just organically it will happen if we keep working on it, some of the things. And I think a lot of the technology is there. We just haven't quite figured out how to maximize it. And as we learn more, and as some of this technology gets better, I think we'll be able to do more. Anytime we can take tasks away from a pilot in a field that don't have to do with flying, the safer it will be. We've seen that with flow control, for example. Prior to flow control, as a pilot, you were constantly watching the pressure gauge, and you're constantly manipulating the system to apply the right pressure while you're going across the field. With flow control, we've turned that into constantly watching it, constantly manipulating it, to now we're monitoring it. We're not fixated on that task. And so we've removed that task from the cockpit. So that's one example. I think as we grow, we could get to a point where some of the things that we talk about with automatic on-off, we can do that now. It isn't quite there yet as far as offset and things like that, but maybe it could be, and maybe we don't have to worry about in 10 years turning the spray on. Maybe the system will do that for us. Well, if I don't have to worry about doing that, that's one less thing. And again, the technology isn't there yet, because there's more than just turning the spray on. there's a lot of art that the technology has to pick up that it hasn't yet. There's a lot of science that it can do, but there is a lot of art that the pilot does that we have to take care of. But anytime we can remove tasks from a pilot, the pilot can concentrate on flying the aircraft and will more than likely be a safer pilot.
So this is an AT-400, and this is the plane that I started my company with a few years back. It's actually a 1980-301 that has been converted. It was converted in 2012 by Reedy Flying Service. And so it had a piston engine on the front of it, a radial engine on the front of it. And they put a PT6-15 engine on it. They put the bigger hopper, different gear. And so it's fairly similar capabilities to 402. I've got the nozzles are off of it right now, but I typically run straight stream nozzles on every single hole. And you'll see that I do have the half boom shutoffs, so I can run a 50% boom for some of the sensitive herbicide work I do. And I also have both right and left boom shutoffs, so I can shut the right or left boom off. I've flown primarily air tractors in my career, and this is one of the more fun airplanes because it is got a shorter wing than it's got a 301 wing, which is a shorter wingspan. And so it's very, very nimble. It's very easy to fly in and out of places where 502 or even a 402, you might have to think ahead a little bit more. This one is very responsive. So it's a fun airplane to fly. That short wing does sometimes, when it gets hot or if you're hauling loads, it runs out of wing area. So it has its downsides as well. But it's a real enjoyable airplane to fly.
On this airplane, we've installed, they're called storm cutters, and they're an aftermarket product that just simply clamp on the gear leg and a piece of hardened steel, and they're designed to cut a wire before it does too much damage or reduces too much energy to the airplane. I've only hit one wire in my career, and it wasn't with a turbine, and knock on wood, I won't hit another one, but this is just a safety measure that we've decided to put on our airplane in case I do have a wire strap. This aircraft also has been equipped with AmSafe airbags. There's airbags inside this. There's actual cartridges and a control unit in the back of the airplane. So if I were to sustain an impact, these would inflate and protect me from impact to the front of the cockpit. Another thing we've done is we've installed, in addition to an aircraft comm radio, we have an ADS-B out transponder, and this allows other aircraft to see us. And I usually run a portable ADS-B in antenna so I can see other airplanes that have this equipment on their aircraft. So this aircraft is equipped with an AgNav Platinum GPS system. Inside, this is the touchscreen controls, and I control a lot of it with that hat switch on the top of the stick. And then the visual display comes out up here, and this is the information on the light bar, the swath information that I need to guide me across the field. We talk about helmets, and one of the things, you see mine hanging here, I think it's really important that helmets are just a part of what we wear when we're flying. There's a lot of information about helmets. There's a lot of different options out there. And we know of accidents where pilots have sustained injuries where had they been wearing a helmet, they probably would have been just fine. And there's a lot of people that say they're uncomfortable, they're hard to wear. In the United States, in a lot of these airplanes, if you look, there's a placard on the instrument panel that says you must wear a helmet when flying this airplane. There's some of the airplanes actually are required by the type certificate data sheet to wear a helmet. So not only is it a good idea, but sometimes it's required by law. I can tell you that the helmet that I wear now is much better than the helmet I used to wear. And so it's not heavy, it's not hot, it's not uncomfortable. And they make them that are even lighter and more comfortable than what I've got. And I think it's important that you get the the avionics right on the inside so that they're not loud and they fit right, and that you can hear and understand the people you're talking to on the radio. I wear a flight suit. I wear an OMX flight suit. If you don't wear a flight suit, one of the things you can do is you can buy FR gear, fire resistant gear. If you go to any type of a clothing store that sells work clothes and ask for like electrical lineman's clothes or welder's clothes, they have FR gear. And I like wearing a flight suit, at least when I'm in the airplane. I don't like it for walking around and working, but it's very comfortable for the airplane. It's got pockets where pockets should be. It's pretty easy, and it's kind of like wearing pajamas, if you will, while you're flying. They are a little warm, but most of the airplanes I fly now have pretty good air conditioning, especially compared to the airplanes I used to fly that didn't have any air conditioning. So certainly suggest wearing flight suits. I usually keep 2 of them. I wear one and wash one, and it's just become part of my uniform, the helmet and the flight suit. A lot of people wear gloves. I've tried really hard to wear gloves, and every year I seem to wear more and more. The thought is if you ever were in a fire, you're going to need to use your hands to get out. And so if you have gloves, they do work with touch screens. If not, a lot of people cut the fingertips off of them so you can use them. And like I said, the more I fly with them, every year I seem to use them more, and I'm trying to get where I use them all the time. Asking about footwear, I like to fly in tennis shoes. Personally, I don't wear tennis shoes when I fly though. I usually wear just a pair of heavy duty work boot that is leather, and for fire resistance is pretty good, and for resistance to any of the things that we can encounter coming in the aircraft, they're usually pretty good. And my work boots usually get thrown in the garbage at the end of every year. Even if they're in good shape, it's just time. And all that stuff. The helmet is expensive, but when you think about what we have as tools, a mechanic has a $10,000 toolbox. We have a $4,000 or $5,000 helmet. It's not unheard of. That being said, you can get them a lot cheaper. There's a lot of options out there. I suggest you find one that works for you.
Whenever you do something new in this industry, and in pretty much any aviation industry I've been around, is find somebody else that has done it and come up with some type of a mentorship relationship, even if it's just a friend that you call and say, hey, I got this going on. What did you do when you saw this? Because more than likely, if you're new to this, whatever you're going through, this is nothing that somebody else hasn't already been through in the past. And so relationships that are helpful to get through that. We tell young pilots all the time is get a group of people, get several mentors, get people you can talk to and bounce ideas off of. And I would say that if you're never managed pilots before, find somebody that is good at managing pilots and talk to them and mentor from them and learn from them and develop that network. The people in this industry are what make it work. And you have to be able to work, you have to be able to find what other people have done and use their tools to help you develop your own tools. It's not that you won't do it differently, it's that you need a place to start. And if you're dealing with young pilots or new pilots or pilot issues as an operator, I can guarantee you it's nothing that hasn't been dealt with before. Typically, the business will require a certain aircraft by the acres per hour. You need to know you need to be able to do this many acres per hour. This type of aircraft will do this many acres per hour in this area. In a perfect world, we'd all have about 4 or 5 different airplanes and 4 or 5 different pilots that when we get this field in, we grab that airplane and that pilot, and that's just not the way we live. I think if you're dealing with skill level, there are certain pilots that should not go into certain fields, especially earlier in their career. We all that have been doing this long enough have fields that I would not have wanted to go into without 10, 15, 20 years of experience. There are also certain fields that with 10, 15, 20 years of experience, I know we're not going in there. Where a young pilot may not know that this is not a good idea. We shouldn't do this. So you need to manage that skill level, and that's where having an operator that is an experienced pilot is really critical, because even if they're not flying, they can say, yeah, these are good fields for the guy that's only been doing this for 2 or 3 years. Here's the fields for the experienced guy. As far as equipment goes, a lot of times you're at the mercy of what you have. And so what do you have, and then pick the best for it. A lot of businesses don't have multiple sizes of aircraft, but if you do, there are certain fields that smaller airplanes will do better in smaller fields. That's not always the case, but I think it's so unique to each business and each location and each area. You just you're gonna have to develop a plan within each company. There are a lot of really, really good pilots that are really, really horrible teachers, and they would tell you that. And I have seen time and time again where a really, really good operator doesn't have the skill set to transfer that knowledge to another person, whether it be a young pilot or a person taking over their business or their bookkeeper. They just can't communicate that. And there's a lot of different reasons for that. And I think that's where you need somebody to help. In a business, maybe that help can come from a friend to mediate a little bit or to develop a program. Maybe it can come from some resources like simply sitting down and developing a plan. Sometimes just a well-written plan is all somebody needs. Okay, today we're going to work on this. Okay, if we break it down, maybe now we can communicate just on this piece. But I think that is a pretty significant problem. But in talking to other businesses and small business owners in different industries, it's not unique. There are a lot of people that are really good at what they do and can't explain any of it to anybody because they've never had to. And we as an industry need to figure out how to get that information before those people are no longer in the industry. I've seen a lot of people in the last few years, friends of mine, have been doing this for 40 years and they're just gone. And you call them in the summer for help and they may or may not answer the phone because they're playing with their grandkids. And so that information is gone. I think it's really important that we figure out a way to get as much of that as possible. And certainly in NAAREF, we've talked about that a lot and we want to work on that. But I don't know that there's any one answer that solves that. To increase safety in the industry, we need to maintain the culture shift that we're experiencing right now. And I talked earlier with you about how we've shifted our culture significantly in the last 25 years to safety, to professionalism, which part of that is safety. We need to continue that shift. We need to keep moving, and we're getting closer to the top, so it's a steeper climb and it's moving slower. I think part of that is going to be recurrent training. I don't know what that's going to look like, but I think we need to start taking a serious look at what we can do as pilots and how we can be training ourselves to be better. I think part of that is going to be a safety mindset that we need to establish. So every morning, we had a webinar last year that every morning we encourage every company to take a 2-minute stop and take a safety break. Have a little bit of a safety breathing. Not that you're going to save the world by doing that, but what if that little thing, that type of thing, shifts that culture that day and prevents an accident? And I think those are the things we need to think about. Can we do recurrent training? And what can we do right now to promote that safety mindset? I don't think it's going to be government regulation. I don't think it's going to be insurance regulation. I think it's going to come in the industry. And I think the industry will lead it and the government and the insurance people will follow where we take it. We're at a point with our safety that we are down to people need to be safer. Certainly our equipment can always get better. Certainly there's new innovation, new ideas that can to take it. We need to be more aware of the safety culture within our industry. And sometimes we're very aware of the safety culture in our industry. When we're not spraying, and we're having meetings in the off season, or if we're having safety meetings, we're really, really aware of safety. But sometimes when we're in the middle of the heat of working, it takes a step back. And I think we need to find a way to promote that culture forward. We need more people to buy into some of the things like recurrent training. Some of the things as simple as making their BFR a real flight review, a real test, or a real exercise in becoming a better pilot. That one little thing, if every pilot did it, would probably make us safer as an industry. I also think that there's some things coming, and I can't tell what they're going to be because we're working on them, but there's recurrent training programs that the NAAA is working on that we need people to do, and not only do, but we need other people can do these programs. There's a lot of talented people in this industry. There's CFIs, there's operators who've been doing this for 35, 40 years that have done it safely. We need them to step up and teach other people how they did that and how they thought about it. And so when you talk about resources, certainly everybody could use more money. As an NAAREF president, yeah, we could use more money in NAAREF. We could use donations. We could use this, and that's part of it. But we need people to step up and think about safety more than anything, and get on that bandwagon. I'm going to give you two. You asked for one safety rule, and I'm going to give you two. The first rule the rule that comes to mind, and I didn't learn this early in my career. It got beat into my head later by a friend of mine from California, is if it doesn't have to do with the mission, why are you doing it? Don't do it. Turn each job in an airplane into a mission. And if you aren't doing something in support of that mission, you shouldn't be doing it. For example, if your mission does not require you to taxi fast, don't taxi fast. And now that I think about it, none of my missions require me to taxi fast. So a lot of the stuff we do in airplanes, the stupid stuff we do in airplanes, is because we're off task. And just by doing that, staying mission focused, you will eliminate a lot of risks, because you'll eliminate a lot of the things that we don't need to be doing in an airplane. The other thing that I think is important to realize, and this was taught to me very, very early in my career, is that what we do is necessary, what we do is noble. We are an industry that's helping feed and clothe the world, and it's fun, it's enjoyable. But there isn't a kernel of corn or a soybean pod or a bale of hay that is worth getting hurt for. None of this is worth taking a risk that could get you hurt or anybody else hurt. And I think that's a really critical thing to think about is we're not saving the world from aliens here. We're protecting crops. So don't do something stupid over a kernel of corn or a bale of hay.
That's it.